Welcome back. So let me give you a quick history lesson. Early versions of CSS were not really explicitly designed with mobile devices in mind, because they were developed during a time when mobile browsing was nowhere near as common as it is today. It wasn't until CSS3 and the introduction of web technology such as Display Flex that it became easier to create websites that adapt gracefully to various screen sizes and devices. Before Display Flex, if we want to take this image on the header as an example, if we wanted to make this scale to be larger on a desktop and smaller on a mobile, which of course became more common of a task with the introduction of smartphones, we would need to do cumbersome amounts of CSS to adjust the height and width of the image at different screen sizes, even sprinkling in some JavaScript in some cases to make it work. You don't need to worry about that now, because we have the property Display Flex, and this is crucial to understand if you are developing any modern web interface. So what is Display Flex? Display Flex is a CSS property that, when added to a HTML tag, turns that tag into a flex container. All tags that are immediate children to this become flex items that use fairly minimum CSS to control their behavior. Bear in mind, this is just an introduction and not a deep dive into CSS Flex. It can get very confusing dealing with CSS, particularly as a CSS file grows in size. This is an introduction to modern web development, so when you have finished your pages, you've got an idea of the concepts and you can then research and expand upon them. Also, if you do struggle, leave me a comment and I'll help where I can. So, if we wanted to control the behavior of all the components within our header, we would add the property Display Flex to our header CSS, like this. Let's remove the setting of height and width in pixels to the image tag. Generally, when designing an interface to suit all screen sizes, hard coding height and width in pixels can make your life very challenging. Okay, let's run without debugging or refresh your browser. You can see that we already have a header that looks different. Each flex component is stretched to the full height of the flex container and side by side. This is because it is possible to set several properties to a flex container. There is the flex direction property that can be set to column or row. It is set to row as default, which is why our flex items are displaying in a row. So our header still does not look right. It would be great if our flex items were taking up space on the right of the display, which is empty space at the moment. It would be great if our links were not all stretched out, and it would be great also if the image was not so big. Let's address these one by one using flex. So first, to add space between our flex items, we can do this by adding the property justify content space between, like this. Refresh the browser and you can see that our flex items are now spaced across the header. Justify content is a property used to tell the browser how to distribute flex items within the flex container along a horizontal axis. There are a number of attributes that you can add to justify content, including flex start, flex end, center, space around, space evenly, that all distribute content differently. In fact, it's worth trying a few of these attributes so you can get a feel for what each one is doing in the browser. Next then, let's use another flex property, align item center, like this. Align items is used to tell the browser how to distribute content along the vertical axis in the flex container. There are various other attributes that we could use for this property, including align items start and align items end. Do have a play around to get a feel for what each one does in the browser. Okay, refresh the browser and we can see our header has changed again, with the links being the correct size now and centered on the vertical axis. However, this still looks odd. The links are way too far apart. To fix this, I'm going to introduce a very common tag called the div tag, which does not add any content to the page, but allows us to separate chunks of our page into sections so that we can control layout more easily. Between our header tags, let's add a div start tag before the image tag and a div end tag after the image tag. Let's also add a div tag to wrap around our links and bunch them together like this. If we then refresh the browser, we can see that our logo is on the left with our links on the right. This happened because, as I said earlier, all tags that are immediate direct children of the flex container become flex items. So our div tags are now the flex items. Earlier we added justify content space between. That now applies to the div tags and not the children of the div tags, such as the links and the image. So we get space between the div tag containing our image and the div tag containing our links, which is why we have the links appearing on the right and the image appearing on the left. Finally, the image still looks large. Now, there are two options here. I can make the image smaller in a paint package, or if I want to control the width of the image so that it becomes smaller and larger when we switch back and forth between desktop and mobile displays, I can simply set a width of 50%. Because we are not setting absolute pixel width and height of the image, it will scale at 50% relative to whatever screen size you are using, so it is responsive. We can see the image getting smaller and larger as we adjust the browser window. Okay, so we have used Flex to create a header that responds much better to being on a small and large screen size. However, on the mobile display, we still have far too much space dedicated to the header and it looks a bit untidy. In fact, if you were using a mobile, this would just be a waste of space most of the time. And you would want your users drawn to your content, not necessarily the header. The only time we would need the header really is if we're accessing links when it's time to change page. So, a little task for you. Add the following code between your style tags. Refresh the browser. You should now see the display looks like this. Next video, I'm going to discuss the code that you have just added, and we will soon be creating a drop-down menu that will show and hide the links in the header on user request, which will look a lot tidier. This will involve the use of JavaScript. If you want to deep dive into Flex and creating flexible layout, see the article from CSStricks.com, link in the description. I will also do my own deep dive in a separate video in the future if requested. See you in the next video. Bye for now.